All right, well, it is 2 past the hour. We will go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for carving time out of your precious Friday to meet with us and listen in and ask questions and be engaged as we continue through professional development activities for the academic advisors across the state of Nevada. My name is Theo Meek. I'm the director of director at Student Ready Strategies, and I have been fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to work with many of you today, and very excited to wrap up our engagement as part of the professional development series. But as Assistant Vice Chancellor Davis will share, this is not the end of the professional development activities that this group will have. But without further ado, I'd like to pass it off to NG Vice Chancellor Crystal Abba.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Crystal Abba, the Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs, and I wanted to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to today's webinar. As Theo indicated, this is the third and final webinar supported by Student Ready Strategies, and we're grateful for their support, Theo. Thank you. We've really realized that we need to do some more work. And it is very important to the system office, to the chancellor, and to the board that you feel supported in these efforts. So we will be continuing these webinars, 4 more webinars that you'll hear more about from Renee today that will go into the fall. And that's all in an effort to make sure that, one, that you feel supported, but that all of the institutions are in a place of being appropriately prepared for full-scale implementation in fall of 21. You're going to be talking a lot today about the critical issue of enrollment enforcement, which of course is something, especially for the community colleges, that is new terrain, and we want to make sure that we're having the conversations necessary for that preparation. In addition, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Emily Borthwick Wong from UNR and Natalie Brown from TMCC, who were instrumental in supporting Renee Davis and I in preparing for today. I can't even begin to tell you how indebted we are for your support, and for all of you, actually. In addition, I want to take the opportunity to thank the faculty in English and mathematics from UNR, TMCC, and Great Basin College that will be presenting today. It is so important that you share your insights within your discipline with the advisors, because the more we can share, the more prepared we will be for fall of 21. So with that, I want to thank you all. I know today will be very productive, and I'm equally excited for the additional sessions that we'll have throughout the fall. And I will now turn it over to Assistant Vice Chancellor Renee Davis.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. Let me get my slides up and we can get started.
Charlotte, are you in class?
No, I'm not, because my teacher...
I'm just going to go ahead and take this opportunity while Renee is pulling up the slides to please make sure that you're on mute. Our colleagues,
okay.
Amber Gomez, if you could please mute yourself. I don't have the host ability.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
No problem. We're glad your daughter's in class. But thank you. Go ahead and make sure you mute. And while Renee is presenting, I'll be monitoring questions and answers. So please feel free to put them in the chat as you come across questions. And I will ask them of Renee at the end.
Okay, so are we good to get started?
We're good. Go for it. The floor is yours.
Okay, for some reason, my slides don't want to advance, of course, all the testing in the world. Okay, here we go. So as Crystal said, she already did the welcome. I'd also like to add to the thanks to one of our staff members, Dave Singleton, who's been supporting me in preparing and reviewing and talking things over, in particular from the advisor point of view, since that's the background he comes from. So thanks, Dave, for your assistance. So today we're going to have basically 2 parts, as you saw on the agenda that we distributed. Part 1 is going to be all of us together, and I'm going to attempt to answer outstanding implementation questions and some areas where we've seen questions come in from advisors and from other sources. So trying to give you some information as well as some resources so you can keep track of where this project is going. We'll have a break of about 5 minutes, about halfway through, and then we'll start part 2, which we will then break out, as Theo mentioned. CSN and UNLV have institution-specific sessions with their advisors, leads, and faculty, and then GBC, NSC, TMCC, UNR, and Western will all be together to get a similar but kind of more high-level review of what's going on. And our intent really is to help advisors understand what the students are going to experience in the co-requisite course. And so that's the focus of the breakouts at the part 2 of the day. So I really want to start out with a basic question, which is, how do I get more information about NCHE's co-requisite implementation? As you know, this is a board required activity because the policy will go into effect beginning in the fall. That's right around the corner. And we have been doing a very systematic statewide effort, including all the campuses. That's been part of the co-requisite implementation. So there's lots of information out there on this co-rec website that we have as part of the NCHE website. There is a 2-part action plan that's been approved by the board, and each institution has specifics listed in those action plans, so I encourage you to take a look at them. There's also, hopefully this is not news to you, that there's an advising handbook for co-requisite support. I have links there to all of these items, but they actually are all available from the Co-Rec Math and English website. So lots of resources there. In addition, you can reach out to your reps on the task force. Now, a lot of those members, I've seen a lot of faces and a lot of names in the attendee list, that many of these folks are here with us today or will be presenting later on. But keep in touch with them, and if you have questions, reach out and find out some campus-specific information. Don't be shy. We also have a full battery of PD sessions that are NCHE specific. They're in advising math and English, and we've recorded those sessions so that folks go back and look at them if they weren't available to attend when they first occurred. So if you really want to dig into something more specific in math and English, I have a few suggestions there. There are actually 9, there will be 9 math at the end of the month and a total of 10 English at the end of this month. Right now we have all but a couple out there. These co-requisite math in Nevada or co-requisite English in Nevada, those are just overviews that were done at the beginning, so those could be helpful to advisors. And then for those of you who are really curious about what's going on in the math courses, what's different about this approach, this co-requisite math course pilot overview is presented by all NCHE faculty. And so it really is a good resource if you want to get down into the details of what's going on in those courses. We also invited 2 of the faculty members who presented at that to present in the larger breakout today. So I'm happy to say that they're going to be here providing information to all of you. And then, as I said, there are many other videos available that you can dig into if you're interested whenever you have the time. And then finally, there is really a whole host of literature out there at the national level, and we're in the process of starting to gather that at the NCHE level and the institution level. But read some of the literature and find out more about the whole co-requisite philosophy and the successes that everyone is seeing in this area. So I encourage you to do some research into the literature if you're curious to learn more. Okay, so I'm going to just jump right in to probably one of the biggest things that I know advisors are thinking about, and that's the math and English co-requisite pathway. There are the math and English task force members agreed on taking these common pathway approaches across the two different disciplines. So I'm going to share these first slides came actually from Ann Flesher at TMCC, who's been involved with the co-requisite implementation from the beginning. And so she put these slides together for another presentation she did, and I thought they would be great to share with you. So as you all know, there's the liberal arts pathway, which is the Math 120. And so here are the various models that the campuses are using. You'll see that it might be a 120E or just plain 120. The co-requisite course is 20 or 20B. In most cases, the students are part of a single cohort, so they'll be with their same classmates in 120 and 20. But TMCC is a little different. They're commingled, so it will be different sections of the 120 course mingled together into multiple 20 courses. And then as far as the pilots, we've listed out there who is doing pilots. So what's great about the institution doing the pilots in this 120 area is that we'll have some data that we can be looking at the end of the year for the first year of pilot. So we're really excited to be looking at that data soon. And then the STEM pathway, the Math 126, is very similar. You can see that at the community colleges, it's going to be a 3+3, and then at the universities, 3+2. So slightly different, but kind of the same philosophy as what is happening with 120 with pilots at NSC and UNLV. And then I wouldn't be complete if I didn't talk about the 124 pathway. As all of you know, this is not a course that's taught at each and every of the NC institutions, but where it is taught, it supports business and health science students. And one of the concerns that we always think about, regardless of the topic, but in particular to this co-requisite implementation, was what's going to happen for students should they transfer within their business program to a school that doesn't teach 124, and therefore it's not a requirement. They might be transferring, just as an example, between CSN and UNR into a business program at UNR. And what's going to happen then? Are they going to then have to take 126 when they transfer? And the answer is no. The campuses are all committed to allowing the student to progress into Math 176, and also the same will apply to the business program prerequisite. Sorry about that. And we do have a memo that was issued that we'll be posting on the co-requisite website in the near future that you can all look at and refer to if you need to. But that's how it's meant to go. So no need to worry about that. And moving on to English, here's the pathway in English at the community colleges in Nevada State. It's English 100, a 5-credit course. And then UNLV and UNR are doing the 101 plus 2 different labs. So a little bit of a different approach, but the same kind of end effect, which is the 5 credits. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the gateway enrollment policy, and there's quite a bit of time set aside for questions at the end of my section of the presentation. So I'm just going to go through, because there are so many kind of areas that link together, I want to make sure to get through all these, and then we can go ahead and ask questions. So for the gateway enrollment policy, you're all probably familiar with this, but just to reiterate and also provide you some resources if you need to refer back to. So as we all know, we're painfully aware that this is effective fall 2021, and it's ready to go full scale at that point. The way the policy is written in the Board of Regents Handbook, it starts out with remediation exceptions. And again, this is not going to be news to you, but I wanted to make sure we got all the details out on these slides as you refer back to them. basically students need to come in and be placed in the college ready course or college level course or the college level course with support. And then that's really the two choices, and the only real exception is for high school students. So where those programs exist that high school students are being taught during their high school years, then that would be the one place where traditional remediation could still be offered. But in reality, it's not remediation because they're high school students. At any rate, that's how that policy is set up. And then the part that causes all of the anxiety, I think, right now is the continuous enrollment requirement. So basically, the student must complete their Gateway English and Math courses in their first year of enrollment. And that is the part where I know that a lot of the concern comes in terms of the continuous enrollment requirement. And so let me talk a little bit about that. Part 2 of the Co-Requisite Implementation Action Plan actually outlines each institutional plan on how they will enforce the continuous enrollment by students in the Gateway area. And so I took this quote out of the action plan because I thought it really set a good kind of standard for how this is going to be achieved. It's a strategic mixture of academic advisement, technical enforcement, administrative enrollment into the first term of attendance, and communications with the student. So it's a rather kind of a complex web and varied. But in general, each of the plans kind of boil down to either one or a combination of these three things, either block scheduling for incoming freshmen, restricted drops out of the gateway courses with drop consent, or holds for non-compliance placed on student accounts at the end of spring 2022. So knowing that this is an area of concern that is also a big lift for advisors, for the registrar's office, for many folks who need to see that this is happening for the student. We've set up some additional planning throughout the coming year, the summer actually, and the coming year to help support campuses to be, get comfortable with this requirement. Now, it really is recognized that UNR and UNLV are in a different spot from the other institutions. They have some procedures and processes in place, such as that block scheduling or automatic scheduling, however you want to term it, for incoming freshmen. They get scheduled in those courses. There's the drop with the drop consent, and they're already in a position to enforce that, more so maybe than some of the other institutions. So we just want to recognize that in the action plan, it is really clear that this is an area that all the campuses are still working on perfecting. So even those that have it kind of down pat, like UNR and UNLV, they're still refining and figuring out how to best convey the information to students, how to best operationalize these things, and get the information out to students. So I just want to create a little more comfort around this topic, that we know, the board knows that we don't have everything 100% figured out. So we're working on it, we're going to work together on it, but there's no expectation that we're going to have perfect results, beginning in fall in terms of the continuous enrollment requirement. And by the way, the reason that I know some of you know that originally the continuous enrollment was really said you need to enroll in the Gateway Math and English the first semester rather than the first year. And then over discussions with faculty members and administrators on the campuses, we realized we had to broaden that to the first year. It doesn't mean that you still can't recommend students do it in their first semester, because of course that makes sense. But we also had to balance that with the needs for faculty and curriculum planning, and you can't teach all of your English or all of your math courses in fall and then have nothing to teach in spring. So we understand there are lots of moving parts to that, and that's the reason it was extended to the year rather than the first semester. Of course, the sooner the better for students, but we needed to give that flexibility to institutions so they could make things work based on faculty and space and all of those other considerations that come into play when you're planning out a semester. So I did want to talk about some of the additional supports that we're trying to get into place. We've been talking a lot lately with the advising leads, and they've been helping guide us in determining what is the best way to support the institutions and the advisors in the institutions. And as we, approach the fall 2021 and beyond. And so this is kind of the tentative plan for the time being. In late May, we're going to bring the advising leads together. We'll kind of do a, level setting, figure out what's challenging for people, start planning for the meeting in early to mid-June, which will be advising leads and registrars. If we have any registrars here, sorry, you didn't know that yet, but we'll be sending out a doodle in the near future. So, and then we also decided that we needed to have a continuous enrollment professional development session with that specific focus. And the best date we could come up with before, we know you're so busy all the time, especially, basically from now through August, but the advising leads, at least some of them felt like we could pick July 9th and still be safe and get some attendance. But of course, we also record that session. So if you're not available to attend, then you would be able to watch it after the fact. And then in October, we will be touching base again with the advising leads, figuring out what they're doing, how are they strategizing, what things need to be tweaked. We'll be talking about the policy. Do we need any, clarification, those types of things. So we have lots planned. We're still talking about it more. We don't have the expectation that everyone has everything figured out to the nth degree. And mostly, I wanted to make sure all of the advisors here know you're not alone. This is an institution-wide and a system-wide initiative. It's a big lift for lots of institutions who haven't had these enrollment enforcement processes in place, or not to this degree. So try to take a deep breath and let's move forward together is, I guess, the message I want to convey today. Okay, so I think that I'm just gonna launch into, how am I doing on time, Theo?
You're doing fabulous.
Okay. All right, so I'll go ahead and launch into financial aid. I know it's a lot of information. I do want to just try to hit on all of the points that we've been asked about. And so we have plenty of time for questions and answers. So I will go ahead and continue. I saw Theo nod, so I'm going for it. So in terms of the state financial aid programs, we really have 3 formal programs. And then of course you have a whole host of institutional financial aid programs on your campuses. I won't be talking about those institutional ones, but I wanted to talk about the state financial aid programs and some general information on federal student aid. So in terms of the Governor Gwynn Millennium Scholarship, I've gotten this question quite a bit. It's like, will Math 2024 and 26 count towards Millennium funding? And so the answer is yes, it will count towards the enrollment requirement, but not be funded. And that's basically the same as what we did in the past with Math 95 or 96, for example. So a student who at the 4-year institution, for example, enrolled in 14 credits, 2 of which would be Math 20, they would meet the minimum enrollment requirement, which is 12 credits, regardless. And then the funding level would be, for this student, would be 12 credits times $80, so $960 for the semester. They would not be funded for the other 2 Math 20 credits. And the reason that's the case isn't because, we have made that decision as a system. It's because that is the state law. So that rule is contained in NRS 396.934. There's a link there if you want to go take a look at it. And then in terms of Silver State Opportunity Grant, Math 20, 24, and 26, count towards enrollment and are funded. So the Silver State Opportunity Grant, for those of you who are familiar with that, it is based on, it's not a per credit award, it's based on an overall enrollment level, and those credits would count towards the overall enrollment level. Students who are in 15 credits or more get funded first for that program, and then if there are any funds left over, we would fund students in 12 or more credits. And that is not changing with the implementation of co-requisite support. For the Nevada Promise, there really isn't any change in terms of Nevada Promise. That covers the registration fees and a few limited fees, and that would still apply to the 2024 or 26 courses. So not a lot of difference there for that program. Now, in terms of federal student aid, I recognize that a lot of the concern for students is coming in terms of continuing eligibility, but let me just address the fact that 2024 and 26 are fundable with federal student aid, including the Pell Grant. You all might be familiar with the rule that a single student can't be funded for more than 30 credits of remedial level education, and so that is still in place. The usual satisfactory academic progress or SAP requirements do apply. So this, I know, is the point of concern. And it is true that if you do the math and use that example from a couple slides ago of a 14 credit student who's in a 2 credit co-rec support course, if they fail all 5 credits, they will not be making PACE. And that's, of course, concern for first semester students because they don't have any other credits behind them at that point. So their 1 semester determines their PACE, whereas as the student moves through their program, of course, the semesters cumulatively determine the PACE. You know, there's no getting around it. That will be the case. But the good news is that results from the NG pilot and also the national data is that more students are going to be passing the first attempt. And so this is not going to be something that won't occur, but it's going to be occurring hopefully at a smaller, smaller percentage of students. And we feel pretty confident that that will be the case. But it is important to understand, and we recognize that that is a concern. So that's all I had in my formal slides. I didn't want to spend too much time talking at you, but wanted to give you plenty of time for questions. And I have many colleagues here who may be called upon to help answer these questions. So I see lots of advising leads who've been working on the task force, as well as math and English faculty. Thanks so much for being here. So go ahead and fire away.
All right, we've got some coming in, Renee. You opened the floodgates.
Okay, I'm going to take a drink of coffee real quick here.
Perfect. The first question is just if you could talk a little bit more about PACE versus SAP. Are they the same thing? And if not, how are they different?
Sure. So actually, satisfactory academic progress has 2 parts. One is PACE, and they sometimes call it qualitative and quantitative, but one is PACE, which is completing basically to ensure that you get to your educational goal within 150% of the time, really number of credits to that goal. And so if you basically take 2/3 of the credit load, that's how you get the PACE percentage that the financial aid offices track for students. So that's where that 67% number comes from, because that's 2/3. Now, some institutions do use the 66.7% and some use a flat 67, which in terms of the first semester, that really doesn't make a difference in the calculation, but as you go on and accumulate, credits and get closer to your goal, that partial percentage point might make a difference for students. The other part of SAP is your GPA. So that in general needs to be a 2.0 or above for the semester and also cumulatively. So there is a little bit of institutional discretion allowed by the feds in terms of that GPA. And so you just want to check out your exact requirements at your campus, but I'm pretty sure everyone uses that 2.0 threshold. So that's the two parts of SAP. So it's part of SAP, but it's not the whole part of SAP.
Well, thank you. Our next question, we have an example of a Millennium Scholar recipient. So in the example, let's say the student is enrolled in Math 124, Math 20, and Math 24 for a total of 5 credits, and History 100, which is a 4-credit course. Will the student receive the Millennium Scholarship because they are meeting the 9-credit requirement and they just won't get funded for the Math 24 component? Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So, so tell me again, Theo, the courses.
Yeah. So 3 courses: Math 124 for 3 credits, Math 24 for 2 credits, and History 100 for 4 credits. They want to know if they'll be meeting the 9-credit requirement for Millennium Scholarship. They want to confirm that first. And if they are receiving Millennium Scholarship, then they just won't get funded for the Math 24 component. How
many credits is History 100? History 100?
It's a 4-credit course.
Okay, so yeah. They will definitely meet the 9 credits, and they will get funded for basically 7 credits. And at the community college level, that would be 7 times 40, so $280 for that 1 semester. So yes.
Excellent. Another question specific to the Promise program, Math 20, 24, and 26, are those eligible to be funded for Promise recipients, and will they count towards the 12-credit limit?
Yes to both questions.
Fabulous. The next one is going to be, we are just flying through these. We're getting a lot of questions. So the next question might be more institution specific, but we can talk about it. Is it possible for a student to pass Math 120E, but not Math 20? If so, what happens? Do they earn the credit for the math requirement?
Yep. So that is a very good question. And I know it's a very important one for all of you to know the answer to. We will be talking about that during the breakouts. And I don't think it's going to be exactly the same answer from each campus. So, but we do have, as we said at the beginning, UNLV and CSN will have their specific faculty there at their breakout sessions. They can ask that question. And then at the general session, we did give our speakers a heads up on that question in math so that they could be prepared to talk about it. And you probably won't be surprised here, there are a couple different approaches, but we will have information for you on that question a little later.
Excellent. The next question is, are there any military or veteran funding concerns?
Oh, go ahead. Was someone starting to talk?
No, that I'm muting somebody.
Okay. I actually don't know the answer to that question. I would have to come back to you with that. I can certainly, I've got the attendee list, and I can shoot out an email. I'll have to research that. I don't know, is there anyone here who feels like they can answer that question?
While we give a moment.
Yes, we have Courtney Schachter at TMCC works with our veteran students and can answer that.
Yeah, hi, Courtney Schachter here from TMCC. Currently at TMCC, the VA will pay for those remedial courses for the students using the GI benefits, but I do encourage all of you to check with your VA school certifying officials just to make sure that it's the same at your institutions.
Thank you, Courtney. That should be standard throughout the institutions, but it is a very good question to be asking now.
Concerning enrollment enforcement and the like, under what circumstances will advisors, or I think this might mean students, under what circumstances will students be able to drop these courses? As an example, a withdraw, drop the course without a refund, so on and so forth?
Well, I mean, in terms of the refund issues, I'll tackle that first. I mean, that is going to be the same as for any other course, same, same timeline. If it's a full semester course, it's going to be that same period at the beginning of the semester, which on some campuses is through the first week of the semester, but it does vary by campus. But in terms of the ability to drop or change enrollment, that really does vary by campus. And that's where we start getting into the campus-specific enrollment enforcement plans. We will have some time to talk about it today. I know probably that because UNLV and CSN have the institution-specific sessions, they might be able to get into a little more detail if they have time with all the other stuff they want to cover. But as far as our general session goes, it's too difficult to kind of break down each one of those approaches. But what I would suggest is take a look at your section, which is only going to be a couple paragraphs in the action plan part 2 is where those plans are set up. I think they start on page 3, so pretty much towards the beginning of that report, just to kind of get an idea of the general approach. And then, talk with your task force members if you aren't seeing any, kind of campus-wide information sharing on this topic. But again, we will be starting to flesh this out as we go through these next months. And I expect that we'll have some more concrete information to share. We'll have to figure out how we're going to handle it for that PD in July, but I envision some institutional breakouts again, maybe, but where everyone has their own breakout so that we can make sure you get the information that you really need to know, not just kind of a whole bunch of information about what's going on across NG. So it's a little tricky to answer in one, in a few minutes.
Our next question is, I just lost it. I was scrolling down. Can you confirm, is Math 124E 5 credits or 6 credits?
The slides, so let me back up in my slides if I can do that without causing a big mess. So here's what is the latest information I had from the math group. Now, the one caveat to all 3 of these slides is that I know in some cases, things are being perfected, things may still be a little fluid. Just like I was talking earlier about the enrollment enforcement, we're not quite there yet. We're not perfect. We don't expect everything to be solid and unchanging. It's kind of the same approach with these courses. They definitely have these parameters in place and are planning with these parameters, but I could foresee maybe an instance where that those additional credits might change depending upon the student experience and what the faculty are seeing and how much support is needed. And so some of those things could be tweaked. But this slide here is the last information I have, which was at CSN. It's a 3 support credits, and then Western and UNLV, it looks like 2 support credits. And like I said, something maybe to bring up in those institution-specific sessions to see if there's any movement on that credit number.
And I want to thank Jeff real quick for adding just a point of clarification that the Math 124 course, 124E, is 3 credits. The co-requisite support aligned with that is the 2 to 3 credits that you see. So the 2 courses together are between 5 and 6 credits. But if you go onto your course catalog and search Math 124E, you're going to find that it's a 3 credit course.
Yes, thanks for that clarification. I think I didn't really explain that.
Renee, the next question is about the placement policy. So there's a provision in there that talks about students with documented disabilities being able to be placed in alternative pathways. Can you talk a little bit about what that process looks like?
Well, I mean, it would be, I really can't actually.
Okay.
I don't know if there are there any faculty that can talk about it? I think that UNR has had a course in place for a while, and or UNLV.
I didn't want, Renee, I'm also happy to kind of give some insight into that as well.
That would be great.
So for many advisors probably know that NSHE, across the NSHE campuses, there was a Math 19 plus 119 course that usually, typically, if it was offered, had very, very low enrollment. We're talking like 5 to 7 students a year. And all of the enrollment into those courses, which is really a stretched version of Math 120, is controlled very heavily by the disability resource centers on campus. So the provision there is really talking about if a student is, when we were drafting this policy, we kept that provision in so that courses like Math 19 and 119 could stay for students with documented disabilities to continue to enroll in those courses. So if you're unsure if your institution has that Math 19, 119 course, I would reach out to your Disability Resource Center on campus, as they're familiar with the enrollment. They typically work very closely with the math department and the registrar office to get enrollment.
Thanks, Theo.
Thanks, Renee. We had a question that was later clarified, but an individual at UNLV just asked, isn't the SAP completion rate 70%? And I want to thank UNLV colleagues for just writing it and saying that, yes, per the UNLV financial aid website, it is 70%. Just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, thank you. And that's the challenge of trying to do a system-wide presentation, is there is some variance, and in particular in SAP, there's some institutional discretion. The absolute minimum is the 66.7%, but campuses can, set it a little bit above if they choose to do so.
And I'm actually going to call on Dave to elaborate on his written response to a question about STEM majors and the like. Dave, could you please let us elaborate a little bit on your response to Bill?
Yeah, so this is to kind of go back to the idea of that there's the different path, there's the liberal arts pathway, there's the STEM pathway, and then there was this amorphous Math 124 that's covering business and health sciences. The memo and the memo addendum that we will be posting on the website shortly addresses specifically students who are on a business track that have taken Math 124 and how that course can then be used to move into Math 176 and other business related courses. If the student changes their major to a STEM major, they will have to go through Math 126, 127 to get to 181. So they cannot use 124 as a shortcut to skip over, I'm going to start as business and then change to STEM, and then I'll get to skip over pre-calc 1 and 2. It doesn't work like that. They will have to take 126, 127 and get to 181 as prescribed. Now, as far as if they have met their requirement for completing a gateway course, 124 will suffice as the gateway course. So they will have met that requirement as having done a college level math course, for general purposes, but they would then need to follow whatever is prescribed for their actual major if they do change.
Thank you, Dave. And Emily, if I could do the same, elaborate on some of the conversations that are happening in the chat regarding Math 126 EE at UNR, since we have quite a few UNR folks on the call. I think it would be helpful if they could hear your response.
Definitely. So UNR has Math 126, Math 126E, and Math 126EE. With the Math 126E, the co-rec there is 26B, and it is 2 units. So that makes the course a total of 5 units. But as with previous co-requisites, the 26B students are getting, it counts towards financial aid, but it won't count towards total units earned. With 26EE, 26C is 3 units, and again, the same situation. So we could have students who are in up to 11 units of math and English co-requisites for their first term. I would only take them to a total of 15. So add 1 more class plus their fit. And I think we don't know how many students are going to end up in that situation, simply because we are seeing a much higher number of students turning in their applications without ACT or SAT scores than we anticipated, because they weren't required. Students aren't turning them in. So right now we're working on getting everyone placement and, working through directed self-placement. And then our Alex came online. So I think we won't have a good idea of the students that are going to end up in that kind of ballpark area. Majors that are very specific in that students need a specific math in order to progress, you can of course make the decision that the student is just going to take math in their first term. So they're going to take 126EE and 26C, and then take English their second term, because we do have a year, as was clarified in that enrollment enforcement policy. It is just easier for us to ensure that students are going to take both English and math because we are doing advanced registration. I hope all of that made sense. I know that was a lot.
Thank you, Emily. If there's...
you and our folks, please direct message me, put stuff in the chat. I'm here.
Thank you, Emily. I also want to thank Mari, who mentioned that they're an advisor and specialist with the CSN Vet Center, and they will address some of the VA questions in the CSN breakout session. We had another clarification on what I was discussing earlier about students with documented disabilities. So the question is seeking clarification on whether students with documented accommodations will or are able to be, quote, mainstreamed into English and math courses, the ones that Renee have talked about. And the answer to that is yes, that by and large, the practices of serving your students with documented disabilities on campus are unchanged with the co-requisite implementation. So if you are an institution that had Math 19 and 119, you can continue to utilize that course. Your math department knows that you may continue to utilize that course. But if you did not use that class, or you had students that were placing into those traditional developmental education courses, then they can continue to go in to the co-requisite courses just like any other student. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left before we move into a short break. So I wanted to just open up the questions again. Are there things in particular that you would like to know about? One thing that, while we're waiting for some other questions, I do just want to ask, I have a private message about students, Emily, similar to what you were talking about with students needing co-requisite support in both math and English. Should they be advising students to take both in the first semester, and if not, which one goes first, and so on and so forth. So if we want to round robin to some of the advising leads that want to answer that question, or Renee, if you have something in particular that you want to add. Renee, let's go ahead and start with you.
I actually, Dave, you and I were discussing this not too many minutes ago, so do you mind taking this one? Dave Singleton.
Well, I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah,
my audio was acting weird, sorry.
No problem. Dave, for students that need both co-requisite support math and co-requisite support English, we have a question about if I as an advisor should be advising them to take both in the first semester, or should it be one before the other? Is there a requirement that one comes before the other?
There isn't a requirement that one
Yes.
comes before the other. I mean, I think as you're working with the student, obviously, I'm not saying anything I think that most advisors here, veteran advisors would know. I think it comes out of how you're talking with the student, what their major is, what their field of study is, and which one, if one needs to be prioritized, you can have that conversation with them about that at that point. There is no like system mandate that one has to be done before the other. The Gateway Math and English course have to be completed by the end of the first year. That's really what it comes down to. It's at that point you use your professional judgment to figure out, do they need the English more? Do they need the math more, depending on what they're studying? Or realistically, should they do both and then maybe figure out what that third class is, if it's, like oral communication, public speaking, intro psych, or a fine arts course or something like that.
And a point of clarification on that, can summer count as part of the first year?
I would have to double check, but I think it's actually the first 2 semesters. Isn't that what the state policy states, first 2 semesters?
Yeah, I believe I think it says within the first academic year.
Oh, does it?
But
Okay.
but I'll check that while we're
Okay.
while we're working.
So, I mean, I think that that would be okay. The only problem is that, in my experience when I worked for many years in the financial aid office, the plans to do something in summer didn't always come through. So I would say use that with caution if you use that approach for whatever reason makes sense for that individual student, but I wouldn't count on it. And it also depends upon, what kind of campus offerings you're going to have in the summer. So
Renee,
institution specific.
It's a moot point because I lied. You are correct. The policy says within the first 2 regular academic semesters following initial enrollment. So if you have a student starting in the fall, that would be the fall and the spring semesters.
Okay, thanks for looking that up, Theo.
No problem. Thank you.
I'm afraid that if I change anything on my screen, it's all going to blow up. So.
We have another question. Can a student who completed a 2-year Associate of Science degree in an NSHE community college proceed to an NSHE institution university to do a 2-year bachelor's degree? Dave, I think that is your wheelhouse mastery.
I mean, that in theory, yeah, I mean, that's what we are hoping for. And if they complete their 2-year associate's degree, they can proceed to do their 2-year bachelor's degree. Now, if they're following like a transfer agreement or something like that, then that should flow naturally. Obviously, if they do their associate's degree in like one area and then change when they get to the university, obviously things change and it may not be a 2+2 anymore. If they change their major radically, it may wind up being, well, now you have to do 3 years because there's other requirements and things that have not been fulfilled from the associate's degree. But in theory, that's what we're trying to achieve, is that the student takes their associate's degree, moves right into a bachelor's. If they are going full time and doing everything that they're supposed to be doing as far as following like recommended plans and things like that, hopefully they are done within the 4-year window. That's the ultimate goal.
Perfect. Thank you. We are now at a point where we would like to take a brief 5-minute break. So thank you, Renee, Dave, and others who have hopped in and asked and answered some great questions. We will rejoin at 11 a.m. Before you go on your break, if you could please change your name in Zoom to include in parentheses the acronym of the institution that you're a part of. We will be going into a breakout room, and my breakout room assignment did not work, so you will actually be choosing your breakout room, but we'll talk a little bit more about that after the break. So thank you, and we'll see you at 11 o'clock.
Participants?
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, you know what? If you do what Melody is saying, you can do it. Just go to participants and you will be able to change it.
All right, the clock has struck 11, which means it is time to move on to our breakout sessions. And how this is going to work is we will have 2 breakout sessions and everybody else will be in the main room. So the College of Southern Nevada will have its own breakout room, as well as the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And we're going to try something new today because flexibility is the name of the game on this Friday. All participants are going to be able to choose their breakout rooms. So if you are not UNLV or CSN, tune out for a second. But I will go ahead and open all of the, I will open those 2 rooms. If you're part of CSN or part of UNLV, you will need to select which breakout room respective to your institution that you'd like to go into. So in just a moment, I will go ahead and open those rooms. And again, only CSN and UNLV folks need to select into the room. Everybody else will go ahead and stay in this main room. So you should now have the option to go into a breakout room.
And Theo, for some of the participants, you may have to click on the 3 dots more to see the option join breakout room.
Thank you, Renee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have quite a few going in, so I know that some part of this is working.
Yeah, the numbers dropped quite a few, so it keeps going.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to start moving some people as well.
Okay.
And if you're just joining from the break a minute or 2 late, go ahead and if you are part of CSN or part of UNLV, you have the option to go into your breakout room. So please, down on the bottom, select the option. And I see some people saying that they don't have the option. If you don't see the opportunity to break out into your breakout room, go ahead and hit those 3 dots and it should give you the option to join.
And Theo, when I've done this before with other groups, sometimes I have to sort a few people in because for whatever reason, they don't have that button.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have it. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay, Kayla. Thank you for letting me know.
No, I'm Tracy.
Oh,
maybe I'm in under her. I clicked on her link, so that might be why.
yeah, you may need to change your name to Tracy.
How do I do that? I have to, okay, so I have to log out and log back in again. Is that it?
No, you should just be able to hover over your participant video and click the 3 buttons up at the top on the top right and say rename.
I don't have 3 buttons at the top. I have something that says view.
You need to hover over your actual video, not the whole thing. Hover over your video and there's 3 little blue dots in the top right-hand corner of your little video square.
My little video square.
And if you can't see that, click on and show the participant list and find your name there.
I can't find my name there. I think I'm under somebody else's name.
Yeah, you are under Kayla. So
Yes, your name is Kayla Boucher.
No, I clicked on the link she gave us.
Yeah, we know that, but we're saying that you need to find the Kayla Boucher video because that's what you're logged in under.
Okay.
Okay, I'm still sorting participants, so give me one moment.
Okay, I found it, but it's not letting me do anything.
Are you hovering over it?
Uh-huh.
Do you have 3 little blue dots?
Nope. Nothing.
Actually, I don't have the dots either.
Yeah, I don't either.
Theo, can you manually sort them?
Yes, I'm doing that right now. There's quite a
Okay,
few.
perfect. Okay. Well, I think maybe while Theo is manually sorting, we should get started because I don't want to
Absolutely.
lose any more time in this bigger group here. So let me just start by saying I'm so grateful for our faculty who've been working so hard on the co-requisite implementation. And I'm especially grateful for the 3 who agreed to present today. We'll start with Todd Rucker from UNR. He's an associate professor and the director of the core writing program. I've heard such wonderful things, Todd, about your work from Emily and from others. So we're very grateful to have you here. Looking forward to learning about what's going on at UNR. And then I also have Rebecca Mccleary and Daniel Murphy here. And these 2 faculty members, I actually heard on one of the Math PD sessions where they were talking about their Math 20 pilots. And so I thought they would be wonderful to hear from as well. And you can hear how excited the instructors are about this new approach. So without any further ado, I'm going to just go ahead and stop sharing and I'll let Todd take over the presentation. Welcome.
Great, thank you for your kind welcome. And let me share my presentation here. Let's see. And actually, let me first, I can put that in chat. That's a link to the presentation. So if anyone would like to download it, you should be able to get it at that link. So yeah, I'll talk for about 12 or so minutes about what we're doing at UNR of one of many different options with co-requisite instruction, writing instruction. And we've been influenced by some of the statewide workshops, which have been really helpful and in consultation with colleagues at UNLV and Boise State University, who have been doing this for quite a while now. In terms of our pathways for the students that we'll be serving in this model, the traditional pathway, and that many of you already might be familiar with, is this 3-semester model with 098, which was a non-credit class, which was kind of seen as a pre-class to our regular 101 class. And so students would do that, and then sometimes use our portfolio to test past 101, but in general would take 3 semesters to complete that requirement. And that 098 class had kind of different outcomes from our 101 because it was seen more as a pre-curriculum. It was a little bit more traditional and dated of a curriculum. And it was taught, importantly, by adjunct faculty as well, as opposed to kind of permanent continuing faculty due to the way it was funded. And so with our new model, with our 100I class, we're reducing that time towards degree by, at least in terms of the writing requirement, by a semester. And we have like a 3-credit plus a 2-credit model. I'll share what that looks like in a moment here. And then students would jump directly into 102. And we've made those student learning outcomes for 101 and the 100I class equivalent, and with the idea that students are going to be receiving extra support to obtain the knowledge and skills they would do in their 101 class. And so here's just an overview of what the structure looks like. So the main class is taught by a core writing instructor. Again, we're staffing these classes with our more experienced continuing faculty members to make sure that these students, our most vulnerable students, have the support they need to succeed. And we're capping those classes at 15 students as well, which is a little bit lower than our normal 19 student caps. And just with the knowledge in the field that working with developmental writing students just like working with second language students is more labor intensive to do it well. These are paired with 2 labs that run out of our University Writing and Speaking Center. So we're in a unique position at our institution to have a great relationship with them, a very strong director, who's been in the field a long time. And so they've already been running a lab course. Traditionally, we've had this 100J model for some students. And so they're gonna be running the labs for us. And so these are 2 1-credit labs. And so the 100L lab is gonna mirror kind of what we traditionally offered. It's gonna support the writing aspect of the class, but we're developing this 105 model, which is more explicitly focused on reading instruction. And I'll detail these a little bit more in a moment for you. And those will be capped at 8 students, again, to give students a little bit more kind of, hands-on, close contact experience with, someone in the Writing Center in a smaller setting, just because it's been shown that smaller class sizes, more contact with faculty and tutors can help support students' progress, retention and their progress towards graduation. And while we think that these students might need additional support as they move into 102L, and so we're planning to do our 102 class, and so we're planning to do a lab model with that one, but there were kind of logistics of making that required, and so we're going to try to make that an optional but encouraged option for students going into 102. And so a little bit more on what the 100I course looks like, since I was asked to talk a little bit about what that curriculum looks like. So we're still in the process of developing that. We've had several instructors, 5 who've expressed interest in this work, and so they've been attending some of the entry workshops through Complete College America this semester. We've done some workshops of our own, and they're going to be given a stipend in the summer to collaborate on developing this curriculum. We're also bringing on a couple hires as well to support this initiative. And so these courses, as I mentioned, will be taught by permanent faculty, and it'll be more aligned with our 101 curriculum than our traditional 098 sequence, which these classes are traditionally arranged around 3 major project sequences. And I'm going to give and I'll jump back to that slide, but I just wanted to show an example of what one of those project sequences look like. And so this is in our current 101 class, which I imagine that we'll be doing something, somewhat similar, but maybe with additional scaffolding in our 100I class. But our first project for that class is a summary and response paper, which basically kind of helps students transition into college writing by helping them to read more carefully, more critically, and learn how to summarize and integrate sources into their writing. And so all our projects have these shorter writing tasks that lead into them. The idea that those writing tasks kind of help scaffold and help students build up to the major writing assignment over time. And so here's just a sample writing task 1, 2 that goes with this project 1. So the second writing task in that series, you can see there's a lecture that pairs with it, and that they have a reading that they're asked to do, and they're asked to mark it, annotate, mark it up, and then upload that. And then the follow-up assignment to that is to kind of reflect on the annotations they made in that reading. So really kind of thinking in a more meta sense about the processes of reading and writing is one of the major goals with our curriculum. So this 100I course, we envision will be aligned around those major project sequences, and that there might be a little bit, there might be some different choices. I envision these instructors this summer working on developing maybe multiple pathways to that, because our instructors like to have some flexibility within the curriculum rather than teach the same assignments all the time. And so we're making sure we're trying to balance between their needs as professionals with PhDs, versus the importance of having consistent student experiences across our classes. And especially with the 100I course, since these sync up with those labs in the Writing Center, it's important that the Writing Center knows exactly what's going on in those classes as well, so they can support that. Again, we've planned for some maybe additional scaffolding activities. The importance of also just giving students more examples of final projects, and so they know where they're working towards, I think is especially important for the student population that we're serving. And then, as I've mentioned, a stronger focus on building reading abilities, because we think that's one area we're going to be doing more assessment with this, where this traditional 098 student population has been a little bit lacking as they transition into college. we'll be looking at the possibility of a contract rating approach. I know, one of the Complete College America workshops on that this summer, are this month actually are talking about that a little bit more. It's a approach in the field that kind of focuses on rewarding student effort and completion of assignments, rather than, evaluating them very carefully on like an ABCD level. And so it kind of rewards like, risk-taking and engagement with the class, and a little bit less focus on the traditional grade in the class. Again, the workshop's going to be talking a little bit more about that, and we'll be exploring that within our own program. And so the labs themselves, that 105L and the 100L, as I mentioned, they're hosted in the Writing and Speaking Center. And so this really alleviates a lot of challenges for us, in terms of trying to find, because we're going to be offering, in the fall, we're planning to offer 36 of each of these labs. And so, finding staff to teach, you can't have someone be teaching, 12, or, however many, one credit hour lab a semester, like traditional teaching faculty, because that can just be really kind of overwhelming and confusing. That was something that I think we had, several years ago before I was here. But also we don't have to find, new classrooms for all these different labs as well, because it's all hosted there. It's an independent curriculum, but it's aimed and aligned with our core writing learning outcomes. And they will be based around discussions, activities to promote additional time on tasks. Again, related to reading and writing, depending on the lab. One thing that's important with this, like students won't be given additional homework to do outside of lab time. So it's not like an additional weekly burden outside of those, 2 hours that they'll be meeting total in those two labs. They'll be graded on an SU basis to encourage some of that risk taking. So not on an ABCD basis. One important aspect of this though, is students need to pass both labs along with 100I, then to move on to 101. We have lab coordinators and lab fellows. And so we're trying to hire 2 lab coordinators. And so those are 2 permanent teaching faculty members who will oversee the lab curriculum, and then they'll serve as an overall point of contact for students. And then they'll also do professional development work for the people teaching the 100I course in core writing itself. But then they'll supervise lab fellows who will run, some of the details of the individual labs on a day-to-day basis. And so I wanted just to take a couple minutes, and I'm just kind of checking. Okay, making sure I'm reasonable amount of time there. Okay, just to talk about, as we've moved to this new curricular model, one thing we've felt important to do is to look at our placement system and revise that as well, because kind of as part of the the justice approach that we see that this co-requisite model does in terms of making college more accessible for a variety of students, and we need to kind of rethink some of our traditional placement measures. And this has, been prompted in part, large part by, administration's decision not to require test scores this year, that has been complicated with the pandemic. And so this is like our traditional test-based placement system that might be familiar to many of you, which we have on our website. And some of these numbers have been, tweaked in the last year or so in terms of the cut scores and everything. And so students are still welcome to use those test scores if they come in, but we're finding that a number of students, even if they have test scores, don't necessarily feel they represent their abilities and would prefer to have more say in their placement beyond those. And so what we've done kind of as an alternative to that, which is optional for students if they already have scores. And I won't read through this, I'll let you read through it for a second here, but this is the language on our website. So this idea of directed self-placement, it's been pretty discussed, in the field of writing studies for a long time. There was an article in the 90s by Royer and Giles who talked about, promoted this idea at their own institution. The argument was that students are kind of, generally really good judges of their abilities, and that, know better in some ways than test scores about, what writing class might best serve their needs. And, certainly there's, concerns about, maybe students will, automatically like try to select into the highest class possible. But research has kind of upheld that often students are pretty honest reflectors of their ability when presented with this choice. And so we've implemented this survey, and this is, have been done at different institutions, and some institutions do kind of a hybrid model where they have a survey like this, but then students kind of work with an advisor. And so, take a recommended placement, or, brings in an algorithm with test scores with these survey responses and tries to recommend a placement. And so there's different options out there. And so I think it's, and so we've drawn on this from a few different colleges, but basically our survey, it's about 15 minutes long. It includes asks about background information, language background, high school learning experiences, reading and writing background, and then also ends with presenting the course descriptions and giving the student the chance to make that decision. And here's just, a couple example questions on that, asking about, if they understand the contents of readings in school, can they, how confident do they feel about reading a challenging text with unfamiliar words? And so this is, we're just implementing this survey this semester. And so we don't have like the data yet to, maybe make a recommendation for this. So students, are at the end of the survey are presented with descriptions of the different courses and kind of, with those questions in mind, how they chose their answers, make the choice themselves. And so moving forward, we might think we're going to be doing studies on, how students place themselves, how they respond to the questions, and how they do in these classes, and maybe, refine the survey a little bit more to be better in terms of guiding the students. So one thing, important to note here in terms of when we present these classes to students, and this brings us back to that 100I model, is we present it as a pretty normalized model. So we make sure we emphasize that it has the same goals as English 101, and then we frame, it as extra support. And so we're not stigmatizing the class in any way. We call it composition. It's called composition intensive, as opposed to like basic or developmental writing, because, using terms like that can kind of steer students away. And so this way, like by presenting it in this way, we feel that it's, seen as a positive, encouraging, and supportive option for students. And, from preliminary findings from our survey so far, we've had about 110 students take that survey so far. Again, a number of students are using test scores. I know our advising team is sending out reminders to them weekly to get more responses. So not everyone is necessarily using this one. But out of those 110, 24 of them have selected 100I, and 12 indicated they were unsure and they wanted to talk to the core writing administration team more about their options. And 35 of these took the survey because they didn't, 35 of the 110 took the survey because they felt test scores don't reflect their ability, but 7 of those ended up choosing 100I. So overall, it seems that 100I appears popular among this group. Again, we haven't dug into these findings in depth yet. I don't know how these are representative of our overall entering student population, but, just a look of overall numbers, we've traditionally offered about 240 spots in 098 in any given semester, which, based on, this was, I was looking at the fall 2019 or 2020 numbers. This was only about 6.6% of our spots total. So when we have over 20% of these respondents choosing 100I, it indicates that this could be quite a popular option, even though students are being given the option to choose into that or not choose into that. So just, some interesting findings there as we move forward with this process, and that I wanted to share with you today. And so I wanted to open it up for any questions or comments now.
So I don't see any questions. We'll give it another minute for people to get questions out there. But while they're doing that, just want to thank you again so much, Todd, for being here and telling us about what's going on at UNR in Co-Requisite English support. It's very exciting, I think, all the things that you're doing to support students. And I'm really anxious to see how everything goes for fall, as I'm sure you are.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any questions. Are you, Theo?
No, I'm not. Todd, thank you for sharing your email with everyone via the chat. If you all have questions that you'd like to ask Todd, but perhaps not in this setting, please feel free to reach out to him. Thank you again.
Okay, so now I guess we will proceed to the next portion of this hour, which is to learn more about what's going on with the Math 120 and 20 co-requisite support. And to talk about that today, we have two professors. So we have Rebecca Mccleary from TMCC and Daniel Murphy from GBC. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the reason I invited Rebecca and Daniel is because I got to see them at a pilot overview, which was one of the PD sessions earlier this year for the series. And I just thought they had lots of great information to share. And I just knew that it would be really helpful for advisors to hear their approach to teaching the co-requisite course. And so without further ado, I will let Rebecca take it away. Welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having us. Really appreciate it. My name is Rebecca Mccleary, and I am a tenure track math instructor at TMCC. I have been involved in the implementation of our Math 120/20 Co-Rec from the beginning as a member of our 120 Co-Rec committee. We have designed activities for Math 20. We redid the entire curriculum of our Math 120. And so we're using our 3+2 model where we have our 3 units of Math 120 and 2 units of support. We created the course in such a way that they are separate, but they do work together. And so we mapped all of our prerequisite material with concepts in the Math 120 course. We allow time in the Math 20 course for faculty to not only present the prerequisite material, but also to engage students in other activities. We know that our students who are going into our 2120 sequence suffer from a lot of math anxiety. And so we have a lot of discussions, assignments that we cover in the Math 20 course that help our students to overcome some of those. And so we talk about learning how to be a learner in that class and how to read a math book and overcoming test anxiety. We don't necessarily have the same instructors for our Math 120 and our Math 20, unfortunately. And so there's a lot of communication. There's a lot of collaboration between each of those instructors to make sure that everybody's on the same page. We share a same course calendar. And so everybody's teaching the same material the same week. We also use common exams in Math 120, which allows us to then see what students are struggling with, if it's the same type of question across the board, or if it's the students in the Math 20 course or in the Math 120 standalone course. We have a master course in Canvas where all of us share different ideas and we create these projects, and we also create the effective domain activities. And so all of our part-time faculty are able to go through and use all of those, as well as all of our full-time faculty. We borrow ideas from each other all of the time. When we were designing Math 20, Math 120, we thought of it much more like a liberal arts math course than an algebra course. And so when we compare it to what we were doing in 95, 96, comparing it to what we do in Math 20, Math 120, it's completely different. It is absolutely completely different. The idea of the remediation of the topics, we make sure that those topics are applicable to the Math 120 course. And so we don't include things like solving quadratic equations in our Math 20 course, because that's not a prerequisite material for the 120 course. And so it's more fundamental in our Math 20 course. We make sure that we are remediating the skills that they will actually use. And the Math 20 course isn't so much of a lecture course. In our Math 20 course, we have a lot of discussion, a lot of interaction. And so we learn about our individual students in the Math 20 course, and we learn about where they are struggling and where they need the most help. And I think it's being really beneficial to students. We have a few students in our classes that haven't been in school for a while. And I do have a quote from one of our students in our Math 20 course. She said, "This particular math class is structured in such a way where we are supported and set up for success, and I feel more at ease." And I think that really encapsulates everything that we're doing in the Math 20 course. We are absolutely helping them to succeed in the class. One other thing I wanted to mention is what we're using for software. We are using our Alex software in our Math 1 2020 class because there is that built-in just-in-time remediation for those students. And so students obviously come at us from all different levels. And so we want to meet them where they are and help them get to the Math 120 level where we want them to be. And so using our Alex software really helps us to do that. Some things that are different in comparison to what we used to do. In our Math 120, we have a lot more group work, a lot of working together. Obviously, with everything that's going on right now, it's a little bit difficult to incorporate some of that group work, but some of our instructors have done amazing things and created breakout rooms, created assignments within our online environment. And so I think that we are definitely helping our students to succeed, absolutely. I have a couple of different ideas of what some instructors are doing in their classroom. We have one instructor who starts their class with music. And so they have music playing in their background as their introduction to the class. And it just helps students feel more at ease walking in, or not walking in, but entering that classroom atmosphere. And then one other thing I wanted to mention was our students who are currently taking Math 120, who may decide that they wanted to go into a STEM pathway instead. And so there's a couple of different options for students because we've done away with the 95-96. They would either retake the placement exam or in the fall, they could enroll in the Math 126 with 26. I think that's all I had to say. I didn't want to speak too long. I know we're running short on time, so.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Daniel. And I apologize to the audience that I didn't let you know. We figured we would have Rebecca and Daniel both speak, and then we'll have questions because likely they'll both want to address the question. So go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Murphy. I work at Great Basin College in the at the Ely campus. So I'm a little bit on my own down here. The way that Great Basin College has been handling the pilots is that I am essentially in charge of constructing a basic pilot, a basic course for the Math 120 E and Math 20 combination. And one of my colleagues, Lynn Owens, is working on the Math 126, Math 26 combination. We thought that would be kind of best to get a baseline, and then next semester when everything goes live, we'll have materials to share with the other faculty. But of course, we've been having input back and forth about exactly what we're doing there. And I would like to share my screen here. Let me pick the right one. They actually just gave me some new materials that's supposed to be helping, so I have trouble finding the right screen because now I have 3. But that's part of what's going on is we're finding materials that should help. So the way we're running is different from TMCC. We are combining the courses by having our student cohorts separate. So the students that are taking Math 20 and Math 120E get their own set of classes, and then we're going to have regular classes for Math 20. I personally did try to keep the classes very separate last semester during the pilot in the fall, and frankly, we failed miserably. I did not feel like that was going very well. So I like hearing the pointers that Rebecca has because I'm like, well, I couldn't get that to work, and hearing how they did get that to work. Instead, I changed the model over for this semester so that everything's integrated. So right here, you can see my Math 20 web campus course. It's a Canvas course. And we set it up, I tried to set it up to help students that are new or returning to school, ones that aren't quite as familiar with the software, so that it's easy for them to find what they need. You can see right here at the top, here is how you join your course. This is copied from my live class, so that they know exactly where to go, how to connect to BlueJeans and everything like that. And over in my modules, the modules cover topics from both classes. So you can see that I've kept the separation. Let me make that a little bigger for you guys. You can see I mark each module if it's going to count towards Math 20 or Math 120, but they're intermingled. And this way I'm able to use what we call just-in-time remediation. Instead of having the topics all separated, when they are, I'm able to present the prerequisite material right before they use it. So a nice example of this is right here. So we're going through the chapter 2 module. And while we're doing that, chapter 2 is about set theory. And there's this one spot where we have to stop and talk about using this particular formula that has exponents in it. And so we real quickly reviewed how to use exponents in case some of the students forgot how to use exponents or never learned. I do have a long interlude over here. Chapter 5 is a Math 20 module where we take some time to step to the side and talk about algebra before we go and talk about financial mathematics. And so this allows me to be able to refer to something that they just did like a week ago or maybe a day ago, instead of having to help them remember something that they did 3 semesters ago like they used to in our old model. And I have had students directly address that as something that helped them last semester. When we were trying the separated model, we still tried to have that same just-in-time approach, and it worked pretty well. I set up I actually have the same syllabus for both classes since they are essentially combined. And the way I teach the classes is to have, if you come into one of the classes, you won't really know which one you're in during a live course. And in my online course, you definitely don't know which one you're in, except for the fact that I do mark the assignments to say which goes with which course. But scrolling down here, you can see some features that are important. We are really trying to support these students as much as possible. So we've started using embedded tutors in our courses. Our embedded tutors actually have access to our whoops, it started talking to me just a second. Our embedded tutors actually have access to the course, and so they view our live courses, so they know exactly how we teach, they know exactly what material we're going over, and so they're essentially a second me to help those students who has different hours and different availability than I do. For example, I have a family, so I strictly do not contact students on weekends, but my embedded tutor does. So there's that. Also on the side here, you can see Tutor Me online tutoring, which we're making sure they have that online access so that even if they want to get help at 1 o'clock in the morning, they've got somebody to talk to. Okay. We're actually at GBC planning to kind of upgrade the idea of the embedded tutor. I forget the name we settled on. I think it's Math Co-Requisite Specialist at this point, where that tutor is not just going to be a tutor, but kind of more like a teaching aid to me to help me with the stuff that I'm not an expert in. Because most college math teachers are trained in math. We are math experts, not education experts. But as Rebecca mentioned, we want to cover study skills. We want to cover how do you read a math textbook? How do you take effective notes in a math class or in an online class? And so to do that, we're working more closely with these tutors and seeking out people that are actually trained in education as well, so that they can help us with that part and help the students more effectively with those study skills. That's our plan for next semester. We haven't started that yet, but Lynn Owens in her 126 class kind of came upon this idea because she, my embedded tutor is a student, but her embedded tutor actually teaches high school math. And so they started getting in these conversations, and I'm like, well, I want that. And so now I get it. And that's one of the big points of the model, is that we want it to be adaptable. We want students to be able to, or we want to be able to adjust to get better for students as we go by, because we know we're not going to get it right at the first time. Just want to jump over real quick, because I know I'm low on time, to show my course that this is where the work actually is. My campus or GBC is using Mymathlab. We purposely, we got Mymathlab, the Pearson company, to combine our normal Math 120 textbook with a study skills textbook, so that we have this custom course that works for both Math 20 and 120E at the same time. And that actually ends up reducing the cost for the students. They don't have to have two courses to do that. And it helps on the instructor side as well, because since we have it all combined, we don't have to run around to different places and custom make all the material here. But what you see here is essentially what a student would see, not right when they log in the course, but when they go into their homework. And you can see right here at the top, if I increase the size on this a little so you can see it better. Too big, there we go. Right here at the top, you see we started the semester with about 2 weeks worth of study skills material to get them started and get them in good habits. And then started into the material for Math 120, and intermingled here, you'll see these sections, and I named them differently. I call them review homework to indicate that they go with Math 20 instead. And I take the grades from these and put them into a separate grade book, because the grades for Math 20 are not, according to our task force, it's not supposed to affect the grades for Math 120E. So we keep those strictly separate. In the grade book here in Mymathlab, they just get their Math 120 grade. And so a student in my Math 120 class, or my online class, is able to just jump on here, start at the top, and start going down. Each of these assignments have the study material embedded in them so that students have easy access to that. And apparently I had that up too long waiting for my turn, and it told me I logged out. But that should, when I clicked on that, that should have brought up a page where I have access, easy access to videos for the students and other resources. And that's kind of the idea, just having this cocoon of support around the students to make sure that they can get through, because the research shows that one of the biggest problems for students in this level of math, the reason they need the reason they're at a lower level is because they just need that extra support. More than anything else, a supportive environment has been shown to increase that achievement in mathematics. And I think I am out of time. I did want to mention, so in the classroom, what you would see is techniques that emphasize scaffolding and building the student, and a strong emphasis on student interactivity. We want to avoid that teacher is the preacher concept, and instead have the students engaging with the material themselves. You almost every day in one of my Math 20 or 120E classes, you will hear me saying something like, oh, well, that was wrong, but it's good for us to make mistakes. Let's work together and find out why, to try to get that encouragement and to keep the students from being scared of making those mistakes, so that they will, so they'll feel comfortable with, instead of just throwing that out and saying, I can't do this, they'll have that growth mindset where they'll come back and try it again instead. For our placement model, we are using the guided self-placement. We require students in their first semester to meet with their advisors, who will help guide them through some personal questions for themselves to decide which class is best for them. unlike in English and mathematics, students tend to actually underplace themselves because of confidence problems, according to the research I've read. And so trying to get that help in where do you actually need to go is good for them. We are considering switching over to a more concrete multiple measure placement option where the students will either be placed in Math 20, 120 combined, or in 120 or in 120 without the support. But that's a conversation that we're not sure of yet. And I think that's it. I'm definitely further than I was supposed to go.
Thank you, Daniel and Rebecca. So Theo, do you want to, I'm not sure that we have any questions yet, but I'll let you take over the question Q&A as they come through. Maybe one thing while we're waiting for some other questions to pop up. Daniel, you mentioned growth mindset. And I know, Rebecca, you talked in that general area as well. Maybe you two could elaborate a little bit more on how you use that growth mindset in your classrooms, in particular with the co-requisite. But I mean, I'm sure it's a practice that now is expansive. But maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, because I find that fascinating. And maybe as a non-math person, I'm wrong, but it seems like that is something new-ish to the math instruction world. So maybe you could elaborate on that.
I think as a college mathematics instructor, absolutely. That's definitely a new idea in our courses to be helping students learn how to learn mathematics. And so we have a running list of what we call effective domain activities, where we offer these to instructors to teach during their courses. And so how to deal with stress, how to look at motivation, learning how to take notes in a math class, like Daniel mentioned, learning how to study for a math test, learning how to reduce your anxiety before you go into a math test. And so some of these activities are videos with questions attached to them. Some of them are discussions that we go through in class. And then some of them are just papers that we've found that students can read outside of class. And so that's how we approach them.
And from my standpoint, like Rebecca said, it's not so much that the concept of growth mindset is new. It's just traditionally colleges say, well, you should have learned that before, and we go on with our lives, right? And especially people like when you're the math expert, you've not been trained in education. Like all our training in education, or at least mine, has come from experience and just doing this. Like wow, I just 13 years. I've been teaching for 13 years now, and the experience that I've had is what I've had to go on. It's been trial and error. But so one of the things that I did for my classes was, as I pointed out, we had that Pearson combined book. I did a lot of research over the last summer trying to find a book full of activities to help, specifically because I knew I wasn't an expert on that content. And so the topics that Rebecca was mentioning, well, the book I happen to find is specifically for math study skills. And those topics she was mentioning are all in there. So I have the students using the activities from that book, and I do try to supplement them with outside resources as well. I tend, what I've tried so far, and this is still, we're learning, so maybe this isn't the best way for us, but right now is we kind of start the semester with those first couple of weeks of hitting that concept hard. And then through the semester, I have little, I call them study skill projects to help remind students. The one I have due on Monday is I'm having my students turn in a scanned page of their notes that they've taken. So that I can look at that and make sure they're keeping that in their mind that we should be trying these things. I had students talk about what strategies they used on the first exam to keep their anxiety down and to prepare for that exam, and share that not just with me, but with each other. so that they could get that out there, because the whole idea is that somewhere along the way, education started enforcing and pushing literacy for reading literacy very hard, but math literacy, being math illiterate, is still okay, right? If you have a friend come up to you and say, well, I don't know how to read, you get worried and you try to help that friend. But if you have somebody come up and be like, I hate math and I can't do math, most people are like, well, oh yeah, me too, right? And so we're trying to overcome that mindset and teach them, you know, it's okay to struggle at math. Math is a struggle. That's why we do math. It's fun, it's challenging. And so pushing this idea, the growth mindset idea, is that when you get a setback, when you make a mistake, instead of just accepting or just saying, well, I can't do it, you take that mistake and you say, well, how can I do better? How can I correct that mistake? And what can I learn from it? And you keep going forward. And having specific activities, especially in class where I have the students, you know, I love it when my students make mistakes in this class, because I have the rest of the class help them out and we talk our way through the problem, instead of just saying, you know, like before I'd been trying out these new ways, I probably would have been like, or I was usually like, well, that's not right. Let's see how to do it right. And then I would show. But now having the group come together helps enforce that we can overcome this. We don't need somebody else to do it for us idea.
That's fantastic. Daniel, Rebecca, I think that you both have made it very clear how student-centric and intentionally you're designing your classrooms. To kind of just, I want to just hit that home just a little bit harder. We've heard that there is, you know, some advisors are concerned, and I say this representing kind of what I hear at the national dialogue too, but there's concern from people who are not math or English faculty that all we did was just mash together 3 classes. You looked at math 92, 95, 96, and you put it into 126. Can you talk a little bit more? What's your response to that, Rebecca? I see you feverishly shaking your head. Daniel, you too. Tell me why that's not accurate.
I want to grab this one first because, well, we'll probably say the same thing, but I spent a lot of time making sure that wasn't what happened in ours. One of the big differences is with the old model, you know, everybody took those co-requisite classes, and the co-requisite are the prerequisite classes, and those prerequisite classes were designed to work for wherever you were going next, right? So the students that went to Math 126, the students that went to 124, 120, they all did the same thing. So here we were having these students that are in Math 120, where the most complicated equation we run into is linear, having to deal with quadratic equations and rational functions that just not there. So one of the things that I took the time to do, and that we've all been taking the time to do, is called backwards mapping, where we looked at Math 120 and we said, what does the student actually need to understand this topic? You know, and whereas a student is going to need something like adding fractions, they're not necessarily going to need to be able to solve quadratic equations or factor or rationalize denominators or anything like that in Math 120, because it's just not that type of course. It's got a different aim. And so no, it's not just everything from those prerequisites mashed into one thing. We carefully selected what the students actually need for the courses instead. And so you're going to see actually for Math 120 a lot less content in the co-requisite 20 course than you would have seen in the prerequisites beforehand.
And, you know, we fully embrace the idea of backwards design. We looked at our main goals and we started from there and we worked backwards. And then we looked at our Math 120 ideas about what we wanted to cover. And then from there, we found what prerequisite topics were relevant, were necessary for those topics. We are not remediating skills that they will never use in this class. we're not teaching a full algebra course. We are teaching them in our Math 120 courses the material that they need for their 120 course. It is very much a liberal arts mathematics course, very much so. And that's by design. This is a liberal arts course. Now, I can't speak too much for the 126. I know that's going to be slightly different, but I haven't worked with the 126 too much. So.
Well, that's actually a nice segue into one of our questions, which is, can you talk about how this course is different than its counterpart that doesn't have the co-requisite? So if I am a student who is enrolled in Math 120 without co-requisite support, how different is my classroom experience than if I'm in the 120 with co-requisite support?
That's going to be different for me and for Rebecca because they use the fully separated model. So they have the Math 20 versus the Math 120, and that's actually a pretty nice model for a college to be able to use because then all the 120 classes can be the same, right, Rebecca? But for me, it's a severe difference between what they see in one class versus the other. My regular non-co-requisite Math 120 courses do not have the embedded concepts. It doesn't have the extra support ideas in the class, whereas my co-requisite does. So like I mentioned before, on any given day, you wouldn't know whether I was teaching a Math 20 course or a Math 120 course in my co-requisite class, because whatever topic we need is what we're talking about at the time. But in my Math 120 course, you would not see any of that algebra review. We wouldn't be taking a full extra day to talk about how to handle proportions so that they can solve trigonometric equations, things like that. Oh, simple trigonometric equations. It is 120 still. But you wouldn't see us taking a lot of extra time for that. You would, I still do quickly go over that in my class because that's what I've always done. You know, it's like, okay, who remembers how to solve this equation? But you'd see me taking a couple of minutes to do that instead of taking a day to go over, okay, let's talk about how equations work and remember this because tomorrow we're going to be using this financial formula and we're going to have to solve for P, right? So the big difference in my classes is that extra support in my regular class is, you know, it's just not as deep. And we definitely don't, or we also do not have the embedded tutors. They still have access to our regular tutoring hours and the online tutors in the regular class though.
And so because our classes are literally completely separate from each other, we have different instructors a lot of the times. They meet at different times in different classrooms, or, you know, everything's online right now. But, you know, we have a 1 hour Math 20 course where they know what's going to be covered in the 120 course that day. And so we have these co-requisite workbooks that we can work out of that go along with our class. And it presents all of the prerequisite topics that are useful for that topic in the 120 that day. And so some of those topics are covering percents. You know, how do I change a percent to a decimal to a fraction? And just going back and forth between those different ideas as a prereq topic to then solving a simple interest question. Also, you know, being able to just read a math sentence and be able to translate it to a math equation, and just those basic topics versus in the 120 course standalone, we just dive right in and we start going through those questions themselves. We still have time for interaction and we still have time for student participation and everything else, but we don't cover those prerequisite skills a lot of the time. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. You know, if you could just kind of give us one, I'll ask each of you to just give us a 1-sentence takeaway. You know, there may be advisors out there that are still concerned about putting students in a 5-credit course when a student with similar characteristics 2 years ago might not have been able to pass a 2-credit developmental education course or something. What is your 1 sentence that you would say to those advisors to instill a sense of hope and confidence that that this model is different than the way things have been done in the past.
That one's
We
hard.
have, oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
Sure. So we have had feedback from students who have taken our course in the fall, and we have had feedback from students who were suffering from huge math anxiety, and students who did not feel prepared at all and were extremely nervous. And they came away from the course feeling much more empowered. And so we are absolutely helping our students get through the required material using all of this co-requisite material. We're doing it, I promise you. We're making it happen.
She was mentioning feedback. I was looking back at my reviews for last semester, and remember last semester I considered that a disaster. I didn't think it did very well at all. In fact, it was a little bit of a surprise to me because it's the first time in my entire teaching career where my live classes didn't do as well as my online classes. But one of my students that did succeed, or I assume they succeeded, mentioned that they felt like their success was due to the new format, that they really liked being able to have that review immediately and have those topics fresh in their mind directly before they had to use them, instead of having to remember these things. And they mentioned in their comment, which I can't find unfortunately quickly enough here, that they had tried before with the other model and they had trouble progressing because they kept having to that problem of not being able to remember something from a semester ago. And then they'd feel like they had to start over every single semester. And this student, which, you know, again, anonymous, but I assume they passed my class, felt like they had a better grasp on the entire thing because of the new model, instead of having that struggle that they felt like they had always had before.
I'm actually getting a little emotional because this is it's just incredible, and it was a very, very heavy lift for math and English faculty, and it's outstanding to hear that there are instructors like you both and like Todd out there who get it. They get the math anxiety, they get the stressors that come along, they get the fact that math isn't the only thing they have going on in their life. And so it's really nice to hear, and our students are extremely fortunate to have both of you as faculty here. So thank you. I will pass it off to Renee to give some closing remarks. Daniel and Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind, if you're comfortable with just sharing your emails in the chat, if faculty or if advisors would like to reach out to you all, I would love to open that opportunity if you both are amicable to it.
Well, I will just close with a thank you to Rebecca and Daniel and Todd, all of our NCHE faculty and advisors that are working so hard to launch this co-requisite implementation full scale in fall. It's a heavy lift for everyone. But it certainly does my heart and my mind good to hear all the wonderful work that's going on. And I just thank you all for your work. And please know, advisors, that we will continue to stay in touch. We have those upcoming sessions. We'll continue to stay connected, because I think that is probably the biggest thing we've learned at the system level, is that all of our faculty and advisors really appreciate being connected to their counterparts on the other campuses and learning from each other. And so we are going to make a concerted effort to continue that connection and all those professional development opportunities and the chances just to share with each other. So stay tuned. Thank you. Thanks to Student Ready Strategies. Theo, it was great having you back with us for just a little while, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.